Broadcast.
To record this webinar because I don't see it here.
I believe Jeremy is recording. Let's just wait until I get her confirmation on that.
Okay, thanks.
So just wait 2 minutes.
All
Okay,
right.
yes,
No
it's
problem.
being recorded. Great. So it is being recorded. Hi everyone. It's nice to meet you all. Unfortunately, I can't speak Portuguese. I could give this to you in French or Chinese, but I assume that English is better, so we'll go with that. I do thank you all for attending, and I do know it's been a bit tough for you all without some of the support that you need. So I'm hoping to at least fill in for now and answer any questions you may have. And I will, be available to answer follow-up questions as well as the whole study group team. So the purpose of this training is just to get you up to speed with sort of how to apply and where to find the information you need. This will not be an in-depth training on every single school we represent for North America. If there's a demand for that, I'm happy to do that in the coming weeks, which would be the right time because I think we're all gearing up for next year's recruitment cycle. So now would be a good time to sort of answer any questions you may have. And stay tuned because I hope this year we will be able to offer you some new university partners. So anyway, even if I were to talk about all the schools now, hopefully that will be obsolete by next year because we'll have new partners. So without further ado, I'm going to go through this. And please, in the chat box, enter any questions you might have. I will answer some of them as we go along or at the end as well. It just depends on the flow. So please ask any questions you may have. So the purpose of this training is a complete admissions guide. By that, I don't just mean filling out the application form, because admissions is more about that. The first step is the student walks into your office and he or she has questions about a program, they want to study somewhere, you're helping counsel them. The last step in this is they get on the plane. So this, to go to the US. So this training is meant to cover sort of an overview of all of the things that have to happen in between that. Now, it's really an end-to-end application process. The first thing is you have to decide if, where to apply. The second thing is you have to figure out how to apply. And the third thing is there might be some steps you have to take as you're waiting for the decision and then once you want to confirm the student's spot. So, and please anyone let me know if you're having difficulty hearing. So with respect to the application decision, where should the student apply? Are they going to be accepted or not? Maybe they have a US passport. Should they apply directly or not? These are the kinds of questions you would ask when you want to know if and how to apply. So the first thing is an entire map of the schools that we will be recruiting for going forward. I think, again, there will be some more added to this list over the course of the next few months, but for now, this is it. You see all of our partners we recruit undergrad for except for Merrimack. I'm hoping that will change soon. All of ours we recruit post-grad, master's degree, except at this point James Madison and Vermont. I also expect that will change soon. Now, all of our schools have some kind of pathway. Now, what does that mean? It means some way that students who don't have the required English level, which by the way is usually if you take IELTS 6.5, TOEFL 80, that's usually the requirement for direct entry. So at all of our schools, we have some way that a student with lower than English proficiency can get in, except for LIU Brooklyn. That's important to note because LIU Brooklyn, that is a school that has a lot of health professions. It was actually rated #1 in America for some of those majors. So for that one, for the health professions like pharmaceutics, pharmacology, they need to have the requisite English level as of now. Now, all of our schools have direct entry as well, meaning if you have a student that's qualified, our study group team is not going to push them into a pathway even if they don't belong there, because we can give you, a commission for direct entry, and for most of our partner schools, that's a very simple process. It's like applying for the pathway. Now, some notes, actually, as I'm going on this, I see there's a slight error, so I'm just going to remove that there. But some notes to this. So with respect to the pathway, as I said, all of our schools have it except for LIU Brooklyn. You'll note that LIU Post has a pathway, but it's not a study group pathway. So that one is direct entry. It's just they have an ESL program. Why that's important to note is for our pathway programs, we do things like waive the GMAT or GRE for direct entry. We try to waive credit evaluation. So for LIU Post, even if your student is applying to the English program, other than that, they still have to meet all the other requirements of the university. And now for direct entry, as you see for most of our schools, that's a simpler process. It's like applying for the pathway. You see the little check, dotted check next to Vermont and Widener. Those two, for the direct entry, the process is more or less the same as applying direct entry to any school, meaning like Vermont would require SAT, they require the Common App, they require an application fee. You will get commission for it, but it's sort of the normal process and deadlines.
Jason, sorry.
Yes. Go ahead.
Just a minute. I can see here in some questions. I think people are not hearing. Can everyone hear? Vocês estão ouvindo, gente? I don't know what happens, but let me see here. I just got a message from one of the agents saying that they are not hearing.
Oh, okay. So is no one hearing?
I don't know. Let me see here. Let me try to.
Let me just make sure there's. So I'm sharing my screen. I'm the presenter. People can hear me. I see something on the chat that says it's organizers and panelists only, but I think that's just the chat, and I don't see anything about general participants.
Yeah, I can see just like you as a presenter.
Yep.
Okay, I can see your screen, but seems like the agents cannot see or hear you.
Okay.
Let me ask her. Pessoal, vocês estão me ouvindo ou vendo a tela? Só escrever na parte de questions ali para a gente poder. Yeah, they can see your screen, but they cannot hear you.
Okay. Is Jeremy on the line? Because maybe she can give me some guidance. Let me just see the audio, because it says attendees, hands out. Yeah, this isn't an issue we had last time.
Hi,
Mic and
Jason.
speakers. Hi.
Yeah, I can hear you. It's clear on my side.
Is there anything I have to do to make the attendants hear me? I didn't have this issue last time, but I don't see anything to go on partial mute.
Yeah, can you click the microphone on and off just to make it just sure?
Yep, okay. There we go. I unmuted, so that should be clear.
Okay, so is everyone hearing you now?
I'm not sure, Roberto, if you're in touch with any of them.
I can. Yeah, I'm in touch with. It's just the agents can just see the first screen where the webinar haven't started yet. The recording is just saying, the start will begin.
Let me see. Then how do we? Because let me just see. And how do we? I'm sorry about that, but this wasn't an hide control panel. Because I'm sharing my screen.
Here, I can see on the top, it's like, I think this is still on hold, start broadcast, so I will start right now. So I think we have to begin start everything from the beginning.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Ah, okay,
Okay.
wonderful. Okay, that's fine. No problem. No problem. I will start from
Okay.
the beginning.
Okay.
So
Okay.
everyone, great.
Yeah.
Why don't you give an intro then, Roberto?
Ok, yes. Bom dia, pessoal. Desculpa aí pelo. A gente tinha começado o webinar, mas por um problema técnico a gente não conseguiu liberar a primeira tela. Tá? Então a gente vai começar novamente e nós vamos gravar esse webinar. Então, caso vocês não tenham, não consigam assistir, enfim, por algum outro motivo, vocês podem me pedir. Eu vou passar para vocês a gravação, tá? Jason, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so I think everyone can hear you now, so you can start the webinar. Thanks.
Great, no problem. I'm sorry for everyone to keep you waiting. I was also talking to myself for 10 minutes, so we've all been a little messed up, but it's okay for now. I hope you can all hear me. And this webinar is meant to be interactive. So please, in the chat box, type any questions you may have. I will try to answer those as we go along. Depending on how the flow goes, I will either answer them at the end or as we go along if it's relevant to what I'm speaking about now. So first thing I wanted to do is explain the flow of this presentation. When I talk about admissions, and that's what the topic of this presentation is about, the admissions process. We can give you more training at a later time about every specific school we work with, but this is about the process. That is not just filling out the application and applying. It's everything from the day, the student walks in the door and needs to know if and where to apply till the day he or she leaves on the plane. That's what this presentation covers. So when you think about the application decision, where should you apply? Are you going to be accepted or not? What else you need to know before applying that will make you know which schools to apply and if to apply what programs. That's the first part, the decision on how and where to apply. So first, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of all of our schools that we're currently recruiting for. Now, this is very likely to change going forward. I expect in the next months we will actually add more partner schools, so please stay tuned, but this is for the moment. You can see all of our schools we recruit undergrad except for Merrimack, and I'm hopeful that will change, that we will have undergrad recruitment at all of them. All of them have post-grad recruitment right now, except for James Madison University and the University of Vermont. That one I'm quite, pretty certain that actually will change. I think we will have post-grad recruitment at all of the schools probably within this year, but no promises yet. For the pathway, all of our schools have some kind of a pathway, and what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is some way that a student who doesn't have the required English proficiency level, which is usually an 80 on the TOEFL or a 6.5 on IELTS, some way that a student below those scores can begin their studies. The only school that we do not have that at is LIU Brooklyn. So that's important to note because that school has all the health professions. In fact, it's rated #1 in America for some of those majors, like pharmaceutics, pharmacology, drug regulatory affairs. If a student wants to study that, they need to have English proficiency as of now. And all of our schools have direct entry, except for one, which is Merrimack. And that's very important because we at Study Group, we have no obligation to try to push your student into a pathway program if they're qualified for direct entry. You still get commission, for the direct entry, except for Merrimack. Now, just some notes to that. So for the pathway, you'll see they all have it except for LIU Brooklyn. LIU Post has a little dotted check to it. So what does that mean? They have their own pathway. It's an English pathway, but it's not a study group program. So for LIU Post, your student needs to fulfill all of the requirements of direct entry except for the English proficiency. As you know, all of our pre-master's programs waive the GRE GMAT requirements for the application. but with LIU Post, because that's a direct entry just with an English language bridge, if the specific major requires GRE GMAT, not many of them do, but if it does, that would be required even of the pathway for LIU Post. For direct entry, as you can see, most of our schools also have a simplified process. So if you see those solid check marks for direct entry, that means applying for direct entry is about the same as applying for the pathway. It's basically the same simple process. Which is great. The only difference or the only exception to that are University of Vermont and Widener. They give commission for direct entry, but they don't really simplify the process much. So for Vermont, the SAT is required. You have to apply via the Common App and pay the fee and apply, by the normal deadline, but you will get commission for those. Now, I gave a very in-depth sheet here about the master's degree admissions. I did this because I personally work in a lot of markets that are even a majority of master's students. There's very few undergrads, so this is important. Just a review of the grad programs. If you look to the left-hand side of the screen, I've already discussed the English pathway and direct entry. Now, I'm not sure that this applies to many students in Brazil, but there are many countries where there's only a 3-year bachelor degree, like UK system. That is actually okay at all of our schools. There's nothing special that those students need to do. The only difference is for LIU Brooklyn and Post, if they're a 3-year student, they need to get a WES evaluation, and I'll cover what that means in just a minute. But for the rest of our schools, a 3-year degree is fine. In fact, for Merrimack and Widener, it doesn't even need to be a bachelor degree. It could be like a polytechnic degree. There's certain criteria, like they have to have 90 credits or the equivalent, but it doesn't need to be a bachelor's. It could be a 3-year polytechnic degree for Merrimack and Widener. Now, is an external evaluation required? I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but a lot of U.S. schools, they require a third party to evaluate undergraduate transcripts because they don't quite know how to assess them. Now, LIU Post and Brooklyn only require that of 3-year degree holders. And if your student is a 3-year degree holder applying to LIU, you must get a WES evaluation. Why? Because WES actually will award 3-year degree holders a 4-year equivalency if their grades are strong. So, you can get any evaluation you want for LIU 3-year degree holder, but you should get WES. It's no point in getting a different one. Merrimack and Royal Roads don't require an external evaluation. Roosevelt and Widener do, but we actually have at Study Group our own agreement with some of the credit evaluators, and we can do that for you for free if they're applying via the pathway, and they can do it for you in a week, which that normally takes 3 or 4 weeks for some of the other evaluators. So we can give that to you for free. If you apply via the pathway, we can get it done in a week. So you can send the application without that evaluation, and we'll instruct you on how to, how we go about ordering it. If your student is applying direct entry via Study Group, then it's a $150 charge, but that is cheaper than most of the evaluators. Is the GRE GMAT required for pathway application? The answer is no, it's not. LIU Post in Brooklyn, if you remember, those actually are direct entry only, so there really isn't a pathway. But anyway, for those, most of the majors do not require a GRE or GMAT. Some of them do, and I list which, generally which ones here, but I'll show you where you can look that up later. Finally, I just put here some of the most popular majors for direct entry, or sorry, for masters. I'll just so you can see it more clearly here. We have plenty of openings in computer science, MBA, engineering, information systems. The only one that I want to point out specifically is this MS in business. So what do I mean by that? In the U.S., an MBA basically requires you to have several years of work experience because it's training you to be a manager. And in many countries, I'm not sure if Brazil would be one, but in many countries, that's not the protocol. Like, students go to MBA right out of undergrad. So in the US, that's very unlikely to happen. But it actually depends on what the student wants. So let's say, you meet a student and they say, I want an MBA in marketing and I don't have any work experience. First of all, they won't get in without work experience. Second of all, what actually is their goal? I mean, if they want to study marketing and they want to be a professional marketing person, or they want to study accounting to be an accountant, they don't need an MBA. They need an MS in marketing or an MS in accounting. And we actually have a huge variety of those courses. We have hospitality management, real estate, marketing management, certain finance ones, HR, human resources. So we have a lot of those. And the benefit of those is they do not require work experience. They just would usually require some relevant coursework. And they usually don't require the GRE or GMAT even for direct entry. So those are some of the MS in business. So when you take the 6, I guess I would say, majors, which is MBA, business, computer science, information systems, engineering, and health professions, that's like 99% of the students who come to the US to study masters. That's what they study, one of those 6, and we offer all of them. Let me pause just for a second to see if there's any questions. Okay, I don't see anything coming through the chat, so I will continue. So, you see generally what offers masters, what offers the general, what offers undergrad, what offers the general area that your student's interested in. Now you need to know like what time of the year they can apply. This sheet just shows you with logos all of our centers. We have January, May, and August, September intake. As a general rule, most schools don't have direct entry in May. Royal Roads, our partner in Canada, does for some of the majors, but the majors for Royal Roads, the intake dates vary very widely by program. So for that one, you should always check with us in advance, is the particular degree open for this intake. But we all have, for the pathways anyway, we have January, May, and August, September intake. Now, you also, of course, need to know about the majors, right? The student wants to study or this or that major, which school has it? Now, the first thing is Study Group has a platform called Course Finder, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe you all are quite proactive in using that. Course Finder, I would just be a little bit wary about for using that for North America, because I have noticed that there are a lot of omissions for the North American programs. So do always check with us, and in fact the materials I'm about to show you, if you don't see what you're looking for North America on Course Finder, you should always double check. And I will show you now where to double check. Now, first thing is a bit of good news. We are actually getting updated versions of everything I'm about to show you. So it's going to be in one guide that's a lot easier to use than what I'm going to show you now. That should come out in the next couple of months, I believe by January. But for now, these are the references we have. So this first guide I call the Pathway Guide. All of our pathways are in here. And you see it's dated, right? It's a bit outdated. That's because we're coming out with the new one very soon. So this guide up front will show you just some of the key selling points of the schools, like, where is it, when was it founded, how old is it, how many students are there, some of the rankings, the general entry criteria. It's just general information. It's not that specific, but it's a quick reference, right? But the most useful part of this guide is just the back. You see International Year 1. That's our undergraduate pathway. You see every school and every major there. It just tells you every major, do we offer the program, and at what school. Then in the back you see pre-masters. So once again it shows every major, every school. It even has these accelerated programs over here, which would be like a 5-year master's, or in some cases, if you have a look, like a 6-year master's, or even doctorate, like the Doctor of Physical Therapy. So we have all the programs listed here. Just a couple of notes I will give you, because again, we're getting a new guide, but if you're looking at this right now, you see how there are different symbols here? This all pertains to the GRE GMAT, which you'll see above. It'll give you there's some key where it tells you, okay, here we go. This is what's required for the GRE GMAT. Don't pay any attention to that for now. This was designed at a time where some of our pathways still require GRE or GMAT, which they don't now. So don't pay any attention to this. This is just the pathway guide showing where, which schools have which majors. Now, you will want to know, though, for direct entry, right, where do I see whether or not the GRE or GMAT is required? That is the direct entry guide, which is here. The first part of it just shows you every school we work with, what are the different processes for direct entry. And again, at most of them, it's very similar to the processes for the pathway. Widener and Vermont is a longer process than the pathway process. Once again, though, in the back, you just see every major, every school. Here's undergrad. So every major and every school. Now, this is the part where you will learn about the GRE GMAT, okay? So in the back, when you see master's degrees, here we go, it just says for each one if the GRE or GMAT is required, if you look at the right-hand side of the screen. So it just tells you for every major is the GRE or GMAT required. So that's the direct entry guide. Again, we're coming out with a consolidated version of all of that, so it will be more user-friendly. You should be seeing that, I believe, by January. So now, we've seen where our students' major is. We've seen, when the intake days are, if it's January, May, or September or August. We want to know if they're going to be accepted or not. So first thing is we have clear undergraduate entry requirements, local entry requirements. It tells you very clearly pretty much whether or not the student can get in. So we have that for Brazil, and we'll have a version of that to share with you probably in the next month or so. We're just finalizing some of them. Now, a few things to note about that. We have those for IGCSE, for IB, we have that for Brazil. But there are some countries where there's students who do alternate kind of education pathways, like they do homeschooling or some kind of, specific diploma. We don't have these entry criteria for every single case. The students still can apply in most cases. We just won't be able to give you a very quick idea whether or not they can get in. But for the vast majority of your students, we should have entry criteria. And we advise you to avoid sending applications that clearly miss the entry criteria. I mean, I don't have it offhand what the grading scale in Brazil is like, but if one school asks for a 70 and your student has a 55, there's no point in sending an application. Some of the specific majors, just note, are a little bit difficult to assess up front, particularly I'd say the art and music ones, because those will require some kind of portfolio or audition or tape. So for those, we can assess them for academic entry, but their skills and abilities have to be evaluated by the department. So for those, we probably can't. We can give you a quick idea whether or not they should apply, but not whether or not they'll get in. We also do have entry criteria for the graduate programs. The only thing I point out about that, and we can share those with you soon, but the only thing I point out is that's also a little bit more difficult to assess because for graduate programs, resume is in work experience for some of them is important, we know. Some of them recommendations, and the essay is quite important, especially if it's research-based. So whereas our undergraduate entry criteria, you can look at those and have, a 90 or 95% degree of confidence of the outcome. Graduate is just a little bit of a lesser degree of confidence because it's not only the student's grades. Now just some other questions, like do we accept dual passports? Will the student be considered for a second master's degree? I've already gone over this, but is it under less than a 4-year bachelor? Will that be considered? So this page just addresses some of those other questions. Now, a big one is whether or not the student should apply direct entry or via the pathway. And if you ask the students, they'll pretty much always say they want to go direct entry, probably because they don't quite understand what the pathway is, and they also don't quite understand what the direct entry criteria are. are. So let me explain this generally. So, what's the point of the pathway? The primary academic point is that it's for English upgrading, okay? The key thing to remember is the pathway is not a way that a student who normally couldn't get in because of poor grades can get in. And I hear that a lot in the countries where I work, which is in Asia. I'll hear the agent say to the student, oh, well, you have low grades, so you're applying to the pathway. That's not true. The academic criteria are the same to get in. It's just some of the testing that's different, and like the SAT, right? We don't require that. And it's also the English level. However, the pathway also offers some things that are more beneficial than direct entry, and at least at undergraduate, the pathway doesn't cost anything extra. So what are some of those things? So in some countries that I work, I do meet a lot of students, particularly undergrad, that are actually able to go direct entry, but they and their parents prefer them to do the undergraduate pathway. Why is that? So first, we give them extra personal support and advising, and we sort of look after them more than if they were just a normal direct entry student. So for students who haven't studied abroad before and parents are a little bit nervous, the pathway is very helpful for that. We do waive the GRE and GMAT for all pathways, so that's a benefit at the post-grad level. And finally, for some students, they can start early. Like if you have an undergrad student who's ready to go in May, normally they'd have to wait till September or August to go direct entry. For us, we can take them in May. They can do the pathway. Undergraduate, it wouldn't add time or cost to their study, and then they can graduate a little bit earlier. So let's see some hypothetical examples of this. So if you look at this as an undergrad, you look at the left-hand side, this girl from China. She's a good student. She doesn't meet English proficiency. She's never studied abroad. She hasn't taken the SAT. So it's very clear this girl is not ready for direct entry. She needs to go via the pathway. In the middle, you see very strong student, perfectly proficient in English, high SAT score, studying abroad. No reason he should apply for the pathway. He should apply direct entry. However, the more interesting case is off to the right. In this case, we have a strong student. He does meet the minimum to get in direct entry, but it is borderline. He's considering taking the SAT, but he hasn't yet, and he's never studied abroad. So for him, his English is good enough to go direct entry. Doesn't mean it will be easy, but he meets the minimum. But in many other ways, he could benefit from the pathway. So you'd have to sort of discuss it with him and see, what he wants to do, and with his parents. Now, this is a post-grad example. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Here we go. This is a post-grad example. Once again, the girl to the left, very clearly, she should apply for the pathway. She doesn't have the English proficiency. She hasn't taken the GRE, GMAT. The one in the middle from Brazil, actually, he should go direct entry. He has English proficiency, very strong GPA. He's taken the GRE, good grade. No reason he should go for the pathway. And again, we give you commission for that, so there shouldn't be any conflict there. Then again, the one off to the right is kind of interesting. So she has work experience. She was a good student. But once again, she has the minimum needed to get in for direct entry in terms of English. So she can get in direct entry, but it doesn't mean her classes will be totally, easy for her to understand. She's planning on taking the GRE, but she hasn't yet. Maybe she hasn't even started studying yet. And she wants to start soon. So for her, a pre-master's might be a very good option because she doesn't need the GRE. She can start right away, and she'll get some English support. So again, you'd have to talk it over with her and see what she wants to do, but she would be a very good candidate for the pathway, even though she has English proficiency. You want to know if there's scholarships available. So yes, we have scholarships available exclusively for pathway students. Some of the schools have their own scholarships for direct entry, but that has nothing to do with study group. I mean, they award those according to their own criteria. It's a simple one-page form that needs to be submitted with the application. It's not an essay or anything like that. The only real criteria is that the students have above the minimum entry criteria. So if your student is just at the minimum criteria, they probably won't get the scholarship. If they have, criteria grades that are significantly above the minimum, they can get that scholarship. They should apply early because they're not unlimited, and we'll usually send the scholarship award with the application or with the offer or shortly thereafter. Now, the only other point I make is we have some quite generous scholarships. University of Vermont has a $10,000 scholarship per year, okay? That's $40,000. LIU, it's rare, but I've seen them award scholarships up to $18,000 a year, so that's like half tuition. But school is still expensive, right? This is still not cheap. I mean, even if you were to get a student with a full scholarship, that doesn't cover living expenses, right? And we don't have full scholarships available, but even if that was the case, the living expenses alone are going to be, it depends on the school, but at least $10,000 a year. So when students come and they want school for free, that's not going to happen. They're still going to have to fund a significant portion of the education themselves or through loans. So that should be all the questions about like where they should apply, if they should apply. So we've gotten to whether and where. Now we're going to get to how. How should they apply? At this point, I'm going to pause just for questions. I'm not sure that I'm seeing the full chat box. So Roberto, do let me know if there are questions being asked that I can't see.
Yes, there are some questions here.
Okay.
Do you want me to read
yeah,
it?
just because I can't see them in the chat box, I'm not sure why.
Okay.
So,
Definitely. One question here is, the professional recommendation letters help the student application for graduate business programs?
Yes, absolutely. So when you do an MBA or a graduate business program, it's fine if one of the letters of recommendation is from a professor. That's fine. But yes, it would be great to have one from a professional reference. I believe some of the applications actually specifically advise that, but that's always advisable for a graduate program, particularly in business.
Okay, another question here. When people do this program, they can work too, and they have only the college, or they have another things like accommodation or something else?
Okay, sure. So the U.S. law is the following. So for undergraduate studies, a student can work part-time on campus. Part-time means up to 20 hours a week for pay. They can work anywhere, any amount of hours they want for an unpaid internship. For summer breaks, and they can work full-time. And then after their studies are finished, they can work in the U.S. for up to a year full-time. If they're STEM students, so science, technology, engineering, and math, they can stay up to 29 months and work full-time in the United States. That's called the OPT program. So for now, that's undergraduate. Postgrad is exactly the same, except the difference is postgrad students, after I believe it's their first year, they can work off campus also during the school year part-time. Otherwise, everything is the same. They can work full-time for an internship, they can work full-time during school breaks, and they can stay up to a year after, 29 months for STEM. Now, all of our programs, the schools also offer accommodation. These are universities, so it's full services. It's not just classes. It's advising. All of them guarantee accommodation except for Royal Roads. That one doesn't have on-campus accommodation. Some of them won't have summer accommodation, for example, but we will help the students arrange accommodation. So, for example, James Madison, they don't have on-campus accommodation for the summer, but we then arrange our own off-campus housing so the students don't have to worry about that. So all of these are full-service programs. It's not just classes.
Okay, I think that's it. That's all the questions from now.
Great, terrific. So now we will go over the application procedure. Basically, where do you find the application? How do you submit it? So the first thing is, where do you find it? I hope you're all familiar with the partner website. It's right here. You can download everything there. But I mean, I also just sort of skipped that step. So I have all the applications, they're ePDFs, and I email them to all of the agents that I work with. So Roberto, if you don't have them, I will send them to you, and any agents can get them from you. But in case, you should be familiar with the partner's website anyway, because that's where you find all of your study group kind of materials and updates. The application is very simple. How do you complete it? First thing is, don't print the form. We're hoping to move to fully interactive online applications, but right now we have ePDFs. So that's a PDF form. You just type this stuff in and save it and send it to us as a soft copy. That's always preferable to printing it out and writing and scanning. First, it's less work, but second of all, then there's no error in terms of sort of reading, the name or making any kind of spelling errors. We just copy and paste. So, you can just save and send the form. I don't think this is much of an issue for Brazil, but like many countries, India, Arab countries, the students have very long names and they'll abbreviate the names on the application. Don't do that, because this is what we use to issue I-20s. So put the full legal name of the student as it appears on their passport. Please include all documents with your initial application. So I'm going to give you later on a turnaround time. And I get incomplete applications all the time from agents, and then they want the offer. The application is not considered until it's complete. There's a few exceptions to that I will go over in a few minutes, but basically that's the case. I'll just tell you as we go along some of the exceptions to that. Please send all the communication to this email address, okay, for US and Canada applications. And it's very simple. You write new application, you add your agent URN. If you don't know that, Roberto can help you. And then the intended school. So if you have someone applying to the University of Vermont, you write new application, URN number 12345, University of Vermont. And then your application will be live. You'll get an auto response from our admissions. If you don't get that, then that's a problem. It means we haven't received the application. So you should get an auto response almost immediately. Then within a couple days, you'll get a notice of that, okay, yes, the application's complete, we're considering it, or no, it's not complete, you still need to send us this, this, and that. And whenever you have any communication about that application, you have a question, you want to send the follow-up documents, you just reply to that latest email from admissions. And that's how we track the cases. That way we have the whole chain, we can look it up easily. Don't just keep sending individual emails. And you should CC Roberto on it. When you get a new North America person to take care of you, you should CC them as well, that everybody is in the loop, okay? If anything drags, we can follow up on it. That's what I recommend. Now, to be honest, you actually don't have to do any of that. You can send it in any way you want to NA admissions. But the reason I don't recommend you do that, and I recommend you follow my advice, is if you follow these protocols, your turnaround time will be quicker. So if you write, University of Vermont, URN 12345, new application, that means it will go automatically to the University of Vermont admissions officer, and she will see that it's a new application. If you just send it in, that means someone has to read your email, and they have to figure it out what it is that you want and send it to the right person. And as soon as that happens, you're opening this up to human error, and you're opening it up to a delay. Now, one thing you might notice is a lot of students do apply to more than one university, which is fine. I mean, we welcome that because, you want them to have the choice. They might not get into one and get into the other. So that's fine. But again, I recommend you send that in separate emails. So one you send for the University of Vermont, the other you send for Widener. Again, you don't have to do that, but if you do, then you know that the right people have gotten your application. If you send it all in one email, someone has to read it and they have to figure it out, and then they have to send it. So that opens it up to human error and delay. Now, this is just a graphic presentation of that. We have deadlines. You'll notice these are the current ones, so it's not going to be relevant that much longer. We still do have most of the programs open, so the only one that's closed as of now is Roosevelt and actually Widener UCTBC. That actually did close just yesterday, I believe. So we have very late deadlines. Every intake, you should receive an email that looks something like that, excuse me. You should see an email that has all of this information on it if you don't check with Roberto. But as you probably know, most of our deadlines are very, very late. Like this past year for the fall intake, that would be August, September, our very earliest deadline was July 1st. So we have very late deadlines. Now, what should you include in the application? It's pretty standard. I mean, like, for example, in postgrad, most of them require letters of recommendation. Most of them require a CV or resume, but not all of them. Merrimack doesn't. So where do you find this information? First, on the application form itself, there's a checklist. Every brochure has a checklist on the back. And then I've put together a quick reference guide that I can send to Roberto that has it all on one page. That's pretty up to date. Now, just as an aside, one thing that I should bring up is in many of our reference materials as of now, Merrimack, because that's a new partner of ours, but you should see that in all of the new information because we just started working with them in April or May, so that's why they weren't on all the materials for this year, but for 2016 you should see that everywhere, so no problem there. Let me just pause for a moment. Roberto, are there any questions? Okay.
No questions.
Okay, great. So I will just continue then. So what are the language requirements? This is a lot of type, so I'll just explain it very briefly. So the first thing is students should have the TOEFL, the IELTS exam. Okay, now if some of the students have studied in English curriculum schools like IB or A levels, most of the universities will waive the English requirement for them. That you will see on the local entry requirements. However, if they still, like, if they have an English score, even if it's waived for them, I recommend they send it because that will allow us to better assess their English. So if you have a student who is O level or A level and they don't have an English exam for most of the schools, that's fine for the pathway. But when they get on campus, we're going to assess them, and they could be surprised. So they could think, oh, I'm A-level, you know, I'm going to only be in a one-semester pathway. But if we assess them on campus, it could be a longer pathway depending on their ability. So not every student needs the IELTS or TOEFL for the pathway. Some of them it's waived, but if you have it, we recommend it. Some of our schools accept the Pearson, the PTE. That would be Merrimack and LIU. Now that's for the pathway. For direct entry, it's almost uniform that the schools require the IELTS or the TOEFL, except, again, for Merrimack and LIU, they'll accept the Pearson. Now, for our pathway programs, we also have a free password exam. Very key to understand, for pathway only. Direct entry students must have an IELTS or TOEFL, with very few exceptions. Now, if any of you have given the password exam, even if you're familiar with it, you should listen because some of the things have changed. So first of all, what do they need to do to take the password? The password exam is a free exam. You don't need to register for it. You can take it any time of the day, any day of the week. It's online, so all you need is a internet hookup. And the student should take the exam in your office. There is a provision where if you're working with a student in a remote area that's far away from your office, we can also give it to them in their home, but they should take it in your office. It's a 90-minute test, I believe. I think it's 70 questions and an essay, and we give you instructions beforehand on like how to take it. All you need to do is get a login, and Roberto should be able to help you with that, and we need to send you the technical instructions. And you shouldn't just say, okay, we're ready, send it to us now, because you need to sort of like download something and make sure it works. So you should sort of set that up before the student is in your office. And the only thing you need to submit or do to take the password exam is you just need to submit the application form itself. So remember before I said you should submit a final application with all the documents, but there's some exceptions to that. This is one of them. So if you have a student that doesn't have an English score and they want to take the password, you only need to send us the application form, and so we have a case number for you. Once you get the acknowledgement that we've received the form, then you can take the password. Roberto will give you the login and the instructions. That's about it. We've had a couple of instances of students cheating. That's why they should take it in your office. And the graders are very careful about that. We do have caught the students doing that. We have ways of knowing. Once the student takes the password exam, as I said, they're in your office, it's 90 minutes, you'll see that we will send you a declaration form. You just need to sign that form, the student, I believe, and you need to return it to the admissions officer. Same way I showed you, via, once you submit your application, they'll respond to you with a case number. You just need to respond to that, say, they've taken the password, here's the declaration. From there, it should only take a few days to grade. We do need someone to grade it, so if it's a vacation day or a holiday, it might be a couple days delayed, but the whole thing should only take a few days. And that's it. After I will check if you have any questions about that, but that's the password exam. Basically, you only need to do the form. You just need to sort of download the exam, log in, the student takes it in your office, and then you send the declaration. You're done. Now, there is one form, which is an acknowledgement of English proficiency, and I will explain what this is. So there are students, as I mentioned, who are applying to the pathway who have the minimum level of English for direct entry. And there's a lot of reasons, as we discussed before, those students might still want to take the pathway. But there have been in the past some agents who have sent those students to the pathway because they think they're getting more commission or whatever it may be. They are getting more for some of the programs. This just says that the student understands that part of their program is English courses, so that they know that what they're getting into. So our admissions officer will tell you whether or not this is required, basically in those cases where the student has English proficiency. This is another example of where you don't need to send a completed application. So this also may change soon because we're trying to get conditional offers at all of our schools. But for undergraduate, for Royal Roads, Maine, and Widener, for the pathway program, you can actually apply without a completed application. Like if you're missing a language score, or maybe the student's missing an essay, their personal statement, then we can actually get the student in and they can send the completed documents later, so they can get a conditional offer. But in most cases, the application should be complete. For these 3 schools so far, if you're applying for the pathway, you can send an incomplete application. The only things that we must have, of course, are the transcripts, so we can see if the student is eligible in terms of academics, the form, and the passport. That's all we actually need to give them a conditional offer for undergrad for these 3 schools. As I said, we're hoping to expand this list, but as of now, it's these 3. Now, 2 notes to that. First of all, if you remember, LIU Post is direct entry with an English program. LIU Post actually allows a student to apply and get a full offer without an English score at the undergraduate level. Again, I would sort of caution against that because there is some risk that the student gets to campus, they're assessed, and they actually have, quite a lower level of English than they judge, and then that might, give them quite a long English program, etc. So I still recommend it, but Post actually doesn't require an English score for undergrads for a full offer. The other thing that I want to be very clear about is what actually does a conditional offer mean? I was informed that there were many agents that thought that we need like your final high school diploma and transcript to apply. That is not the case, okay? So for Americans, we apply to university when we're still in high school. So of course we don't have our diploma yet and our final grades. That's fine. The only thing we need for the application if they're applying for university, undergraduate, is the first half-year grades. So if they're in their 4th year of high school, we only need the first semester grades to make our decision. They will eventually have to send their final grades and their transcript and diploma, but not the final one to start with. And that's not considered a conditional offer. I mean, that's a full offer. Every school in America has that protocol. Now, this is different than the UK, where students are explicitly given a conditional offer, and it says you have to attain these scores to get the final offer. Now, to be clear, the U.S., there is some risk to a student then getting their offer withdrawn, but it's extremely rare that that would happen. So let me give you an example. Let's say your student gets into the University of Vermont, which generally requires a B average, and they get in. And then they fail their last semester and they don't get a diploma. Well, of course, if they don't graduate high school, they're going to have their offer withdrawn for university. And then it is possible that the student just does terribly their last semester. You know, the school requires Bs and they get all Ds. They just barely graduate. At that point, your student is also at risk for their offer to be withdrawn. But basically, as long as they kind of graduate and don't have a disaster, their offer will not be withdrawn. Why does the U.S. not make that explicit? First, they don't want to withdraw offers, so they're very reluctant to do that. But they also don't want to encourage your students to do badly in high school, so they won't say you need to maintain a D average. They don't want to tell the student that. So just make sure if your student gets in, they pass their final classes and get their diploma. And it's very unlikely they would have their offer withdrawn. But that's not a conditional offer. When I say conditional, I just mean they don't have to send the full documentation. Now, what's different about graduate applications than undergrad? I mean, this is all implicit in all the checklists that I've shown you. On the application form it tells, in the brochure it tells, but just as a review, you know, graduate applications generally require a resume, a CV, and letters of recommendation. None of our undergraduate requires resume or CV, and only 1 or 2 of them ask for letters of recommendation. Turnaround times are generally longer, and I'll go through that. That has to do because it's a more complicated application and because the faculty actually has to review the application, not just the admissions committee. So because of that, the deadlines are generally a little bit earlier. Not in every case, but typically. Again, that's also implicit in, you know, all the guides that I've showed you. It tells you what's required for each application. Now, for credit evaluations, I did talk about this briefly. So not all of them require credit evaluation. Some of our schools don't, and I've shown you that on the previous checklist. Remember, LIU, it only requires those for 3-year degree holders. If your student doesn't have a credit evaluation already, we will help you to get one, okay? So all you have to do is you send your application, you know, with hopefully it's complete, but it doesn't, you know, doesn't even need to be. They'll say it requires a credit evaluation. Do you want us to help you? If your student is applying for the pathway, again, we'll do that for free. Direct entry, it's $150. Either way, that's cheaper than other alternatives you'll have, and we can usually do it more quickly. You say, yes, we want help with the credit evaluation. They'll ask you to sign an authorization form, and they'll tell you how and where to submit the documents. Every country has a different list of documents, so those will be Brazil specific. And because I don't cover Brazil, I'm not 100% sure whether or not you actually need to send anything original. Some countries you do, others you don't. Roberto should have that information, and I can check for you. I'm just not sure if for Brazil you need to send anything original. And generally they require about 5 or 7 working days. If you're applying, you know, pretty late, we'll get a rush job, so we'll make sure it gets done on time. The only thing you really need to do is once you send those documents, you have to notify the admissions officer that you've sent it and the tracking number as well, any shipping information you can give us. Because if you don't send that, there have been occasions where those documents have just sat, you know, with the evaluator and no one has reviewed them. So do let us know to expect it. Some students do opt to provide their own credit evaluation, it's the same thing. The admissions officer will tell you where to send it. You just have to let us know when you've actually sent it. That's it. What's different about direct applications? As I mentioned, most of our schools have direct applications. They're mostly the same process as the pathway. You can look up in the quick reference guide for now, the direct entry guide for now, what the process is, but we're going to send you all a new guide for that. James Madison, we're going to have that direct entry now. That's already confirmed. So we typically didn't have direct entry at James Madison. We will starting in the fall. Royal Roads, we now have direct entry as well. We didn't always have that. UVM and Widener, they do pay the direct entry commission, but the applications are not simple, and they will have an application fee. What are the differences? Mainly come at the graduate level. So first of all, the direct entry deadline is usually a little bit earlier than the pathway. For graduate level direct entry, the GRE or GMAT will often be required, and I showed you where you look that up already. And actually, most of our schools for direct entry undergraduate don't require the SAT. It's only one of them that does, which is the University of Vermont. And basically, almost all of our majors are open for direct entry. You might know that not all majors have a pathway, but almost every major, like, we can, recruit direct for that. There's a few very limited cases that we can't. For some of the schools, it's some of the professional licensing classes, like a doctorate in psychology. Some of those are blocked, but basically almost every program that all of our universities have are open for direct entry. In the guide, it'll have a little bit of a note if it's not. We have that guide that can answer your questions, and we'll have a better and consolidated guide in a few months. So that's it. That's the application procedure. You've sent the application, and all you really need to do is wait. Let me pause at this point for any questions, and we're just about done. We probably just have 5 to 10 more minutes. So do let me know, Roberto, if there's any questions.
Yeah, no questions from now.
Okay, great. I'm glad. It must be clear then. Okay, so now you've figured out where you should apply. You've sent the application, so all there is to do is wait. Once again, how do you follow up on that application? Best thing to do is if you've communicated with admissions, they've sent you an acknowledgement. Any questions you have, you want to follow up on the timing, you forgot to send something, just reply to the latest email from admissions and CC us on it. CC Roberto and whoever your new North America person will be, so that they can help you do any follow-up if necessary. If you have any questions about commissions, then you see or any sort of financial questions, you check Finance US. That's the people to talk to. Sometimes you'll hear if there's been some problem with payment. There's another email address that might contact you. I think it's like henna@payments@studygroup or something like that. If you get an email from them, you can also reply to that. The only thing on here that I would caution against is you see there's that NA queries email. They certainly will respond to you, but those are the admissions officers, so of course their first priority is the live applications. Most questions you can refer to Roberto or one of our other recruitment staff. We can pretty much answer anything you might need to know. So I would just avoid using the NA queries one unless it's really not at all urgent, because again, those are admissions officers who are working on live applications. We can probably answer any questions you have, and that's what we're here for. Now this is important, so turnaround time. Here's the deal. So our undergraduate pathways, the turnaround time it should be a week, okay? That's from a completed application, and I just need to repeat that because so many times I'm getting chased, this application is delayed, it's late, and then I go check the application's maybe never even been completed, or yeah, it was actually complete, yesterday or 2 days ago, and I don't really care if the original email was sent a month ago. If it wasn't complete, the turnaround time does not apply. This is completed applications. So for undergraduate pathway, it's 5 days. For graduate pathway, it's about 3 weeks. Okay, that's the general rule. What are the exceptions to that? For direct entry, they do generally make the same promise as pathway, but I would say give it a couple extra days. So if you have a direct entry for undergraduate, we say 5 days. I'd say allow an extra couple of days just because, the university is handling that, not study group. We do pass them the application, so you do have to send it to us, but the university is fully responsible for the decision, so, they're not quite as diligent as we would be. So allow a couple extra days for direct applications. Again, undergraduate 5 business days, postgrad 3 weeks. There are 2 exceptions to that. One is LIU. They just take longer. So undergrad will take 2 to 4 weeks. Graduate will take 4 to 6 weeks. That is very variable depending on which faculty you apply to. So some of them are very fast, others are slower, and they do speed up the process a bit if you're applying quite late. So LIU is still accepting applications now for the January intake. If you're applying this late, I can't guarantee you that you'll be able to make it in time for January, but the school will speed it up a little bit in an effort to make that happen. The other exception for now is Royal Roads. Their undergrad is pretty quick, but their graduate, I'm just telling you, it takes a long time. It'll take 6 to 8 weeks. Now that will speed up because study group has a new agreement with Royal Roads. So as we go along, that direct entry graduate will speed up there. But for now, we advise you to apply quite early if you have a direct entry or a post-grad applicant for Royal Roads. But for most of our programs and pathways, it's 5 days undergrad, 3 weeks for post-grad. So what do you do if there's a delay, if it's already passed? The first thing I say, do not wait. Okay, it's our responsibility to do this on time, but it's your responsibility also to sort of stay on top of it. And this is important because in my regions where I cover, some of the countries in particular, I'll get an email. This student applied 4 months ago and they haven't heard back. I mean, at that point, what difference does it make anymore? The student probably is already decided not to go there. When we say a week, we mean a week, and if it's a week, you should follow up. If we say 3 weeks, it should be 3 weeks, and after 3 weeks, you should follow up. Okay, so that's the first thing. You reply to admissions to follow up, and you CC us on it. And then the only other thing I will say again is make sure that that application is complete, and that's when the clock starts, not when you first send us any application material. Now, there is a form we have for exceptional cases. So what does that mean? This document you can use 2 different ways. One is if the student got in and just wishes to defer for whatever reason, we do allow you to defer for 1 intake. So, the student's gotten in, they still want to accept the offer, but you want to defer, you just return this form. Second thing is, and this is perhaps more interesting, you're going to get the entry criteria in the next month or 2. And let's say you have a student that doesn't quite meet that criteria for the pathway, but they have a very compelling reason not to. Let me give you some examples. So their overall average is slightly below what the University of Vermont wants. But the reason for that is because in 1 semester, they moved schools, they had a terrible health issue, their mother passed away, and that semester of high school they did really badly, but then their performance improved after that. That's the kind of thing you use this form for, and you will explain what the situation is, and I have seen students get into the pathway using that form. So you should use that if there's a good explanation for your students' underperformance, and you should send that with the application. When this will probably not help is if the student has already been rejected, and then you say, oh, no, wait, you don't understand. In that case, they're probably not, it's not going to really help, I think. So you should use this to defer, and when you have a student, who is borderline. One other thing I forgot to mention about the turnaround times that I should just mention, given that it's December already almost. Just one thing, you can occasionally send applications very, very early, right? I have some students just today who sent me applications for next fall. Just note that some of the schools don't really begin to review those applications until the previous intake is finished. So right now the schools are mostly rushing to, get the January intake finished. So if you send an application now for fall 2016, it might not be reviewed in a timely fashion. That's the only note I would make about this. If you send an application extremely early, they sometimes need to close out the immediate intake before they review that. So the student wants to confirm now what? This I actually won't spend a lot of time on because this is a little bit different by country, but the basic process is this. You get the offer, the student wants to confirm. You should read the email with the offer because that will have attachments to it. Reason, again, I'm not going into detail, is each school has slightly different document requirements. So some of them will ask you to sign a form, some of them will ask you to sign 2 forms, some of them will ask you to send them something. So you just read the email that you got the offer in carefully and make sure every kind of signature they're asking for, you respond with that. You also have to pay a deposit. Again, the reason I'm not going to go over that in detail is that also depends which school and which program. The deposit amounts are slightly different. I believe for Brazil, for 95% of your students, it should be a $2,000 deposit. And so that's what you do. You return the documents, you pay the deposit, you use our pay online system, so that takes credit card, or you can actually do a bank transfer, but you still have to do it via pay online, because what you do is you click on bank transfer, it gives you the transfer instructions, and it gives you a reference number to cite. And that's how we track your payments. So you do use the pay online system to do a bank transfer or credit card payment. You send that acknowledgement along with the other documents. We usually can issue an I-20 very quickly. It's usually within a few days. And if you're applying very late, or you just want to set up the appointment with the embassy very quickly, you can ask us to send you the SEVIS number electronically. That SEVIS number is what you actually use to book the appointment. So even though we should send you the I-20 very quickly, we should be able to send you the SEVIS number even more quickly. And with these 2 delays, it's the same process as an application delay. You haven't seen any I-20 information in 3, 4, 5 days, chase that with admissions. With that one, I will just have to in advance give you my apologies a little bit in advance, because those have to be issued by the university. Study group passes those to you, but we have no legal ability to issue them ourselves. So that one we usually have to chase the university for a little bit, okay? So do chase us for that, but just have a little bit more understanding that there may be some delay for that just because the university has to issue that. But as soon as you're waiting more than a few days, you should remind us about it. Now, there is a welcome package. Again, I'm not going to go over this in any great detail because it's different by school, but the point is you should read that welcome package carefully and you should comply with the steps. So some of them have housing preferences, some of them there is a placement exam your student will need to take. That doesn't affect their offer, but it will help guide us as to what courses they should take. Whatever that welcome package is asking for, you should comply with. And that, again, it could be anything like send this document, take this test, let us know about housing. Just read through it and follow up appropriately. And then you send, your student on the plane. Do they need an airport pickup? This just shows you, what the airport pickup options are for each school. That's it. So you send your student, and that's it. They go to the university. If you have any finance questions, like with commission, I've already showed you who to follow up with, and that should be the end-to-end admissions process. At this point, I will open it up for questions because that's all I have in terms of presentation. Anything at all?
No questions here, Jason. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very clear. I was just wondering about the OPT. How does student apply for OPT?
Oh, okay, great. So OPT is not something they need to worry about when they're applying for school. That's handled once they're at school. So I don't have a very detailed overview of that process, but it's basically this. So basically the 12-month thing is more or less guaranteed. There is some procedure they have to undertake, and the basic criteria is they just need to have a job, and it needs to be relevant to their course of study. So if they've done computer science and now they want to work in a bank, that's not going to work. It needs to be something relevant to computer science. And it should be more or less automatic. I think there is some form that they have to, some procedure the school has to help them with, but it's not an extensive procedure, and they don't need to worry about that until they're in their, final maybe semester of university. Now for the STEM extension, because that's for science, technology, engineering, and math. That's an additional 17 months for now. That policy is being reviewed by the U.S. government in February of 2016, but for now it's 17 months. Same thing. When they apply for the initial OPT, which is a very simple process, they just they have to list their major and they have to list the kind of position they've got, and there is a full list of majors according to the U.S. government that's considered as STEM. If you need to know what those are, I can email that to you. I have the full list.
Okay, Jason, thank you very much. And please send me the recording of this training. Some agents are asking me already about it. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, great. And do let me know if you need a follow-up about the programs. I'm happy to give that as well. So I will talk to you all soon, and thank you for attending.
Ok. Obrigado, pessoal. Qualquer dúvida eu estou à disposição e eu vou enviar depois para vocês o treinamento, o vídeo do treinamento e também os slides da apresentação. Muito obrigado. Tenha um bom dia. Thanks, Jason.
Bye-bye.